So good.
Stranger Things. Oh, yeah.
I know. I'm so glad you mentioned Stranger Things because I was like, I really, really enjoyed it. I have to admit, I was like, wow. I mean, there's some nostalgia there for us, of a certain age as well. But in addition to that, it's just such a fun story and
good portion of it done in Quebec City, down in our studios in our Saint Roch area.
Yeah, they could just work right there. Wow.
Hello, and welcome again to the Pathways podcast, where we explore different careers in the Quebec City region. I'm your host, Susanna Tang, from Voice of English-Speaking Quebec. Today, I'll be speaking with Marjolaine Tremblay about her career in visual effects. Marjo started as an animator and was one of the first Quebecers to land a job in Hollywood. She has worked on such hit movies like Jumanji, Men in Black, Star Wars, and many more. Now, she currently works as an executive producer in Quebec for Rodeo FX. Here's Marjo.
I sort of remember the first movie I saw. It was Benji. Don't know if anybody knows what that is, but it's a dog movie. But truly, my second movie was Star Wars. And that day was what launched me into this whole world. I mean, I must have been, 4 or 5 years old. And I knew already, oh my God, this is what I want to do. I want to live that fantasy. And ever since, I was reading, I would buy magazines that were in English about special effects and visual effects and movie making, and I couldn't even read them because back then I wasn't speaking English. I would just look at the photos and try to understand how they would do things, and yeah, it was very inspiring.
I can't believe you knew at 4 or 5.
Oh, I love Star Wars. I wanted to live Star Wars. I wanted to be in that fantasy world. I wanted to, be a character. And by the way, I did get to wear one of the suits one time at the archives at Lucasfilm. So I got to play one of the musician, that's in the bar. I got to wear that whole costume. And you see like 32 R2D2s or something like that. There was a whole bunch of them because they had some that were men, some that were robots. So it was it was so cool.
So part of it was, we're going to go now to how you started in the field, but part of it was, okay, you were inspired when you were 4 or 5 years old watching Star Wars. But how did you actually get involved in the film industry?
Yeah, actually, I started to make inquiries in high school. Spoke to my career counselor, and I told him exactly what I wanted to do, and then he started to pull out information for me. I would volunteer at school to film all the events. I was doing everything I could to learn, and then National Film Board of Canada used to do these animated tours where you could go and learn how to be an animator. And you would actually do a short film. And I participated in one of those events because my counselor said, oh, they're coming to Quebec and you could go at l'Université Laval and do a weekend intensive. So I participated and we did a film. So after high school, I did go to St. Lawrence in Quebec to learn and push my English more, because back then there was barely anything happening in Quebec. I mean, there was the local filmmaking, but there was not that kind of international Hollywood filmmaking yet. And then I went to Concordia University and studied traditional animation. And so I did my first internship at Pascal Blais production. They used to do a lot of commercial. I don't know if you remember the quick commercial, the rabbits.
Yes.
So I did some internship with them on that project. And then I got hired really quickly as a true animation checker, I would say, and colorist to do Words Around the World at Cine Group and Spirou and things like that. All more traditional animation, because back then CG and computer graphics was not something you would do. It was still very traditional. So it was miniatures and traditional animation. That's all there was.
When you say traditional animation, you're talking you used to draw by hand then?
Correct. It's not a prerequisite anymore. I recommend having some, no matter what, because it gives you extra skill and it tunes in your eye and how you perceive things. So it's always a good thing to have. And when I was at Cine Group, one of my boss, Pierre Robidoux, he said, Marjo, if you want to do this, you've got to start learning computers right now. And we had some computers at Cine Group to do the coloring. And he put me in touch with Softimage, who was just in its early beginning. And he sent me to a intensive, like a 3-week intensive to learn computer graphics. And oh my God, I fell in love with computer graphics. I didn't want to do traditional anymore.
And she didn't stop there. At one point, she was juggling classes at both Concordia and the NAD, while also doing CGI for another company. Indeed, Marjo is a great example of how persistence and hard work pays off, because soon after, she was working at George Lucas's visual effects company, Industrial Light and Magic. It might be interesting, I think, for the listeners to hear. Can you list some of these films that you've worked on?
Oh, geez. Jumanji was my first film ever, the original one, not the remake, although I did work on one of the remakes. Worked on Men in Black, the first one right after that. Worked on 101 Dalmatians, Pirates of the Caribbean, Star Wars, Hulk. There's the Underworld. The list is long. I mean, it's 3 pages long.
Super, super impressive, because these are the films that I'll kind of revisiting.
Yeah, some are being revisited. Absolutely. Like Jumanji was one of them with The Rock and the Men in Black series. I mean, there's been 4 of them now. And my second film was Men in Black. And then at Rodeo, we also did Men in Black, the last one.
Oh, okay. With I always call him Thor.
Yes. Hemsworth.
So chances are, Marjo has worked on one of your favorite movies. Next, I asked Marjo to describe her tasks as an animator and an executive producer.
For me, I mean, I was on the creative side. I was an animator. I would bring life to characters. But I also was what they call, more like a technical animator as well. So I would be able to do things like rigging. So think about it as your bone structure and your muscle mass, so that an animator could use that and move a character around. So I knew how to do that. Me as an executive producer, who I am now, I specialize a little bit more into the business development side of things, where I would take a script, for example, and let's say there's no director on the project yet. They just have a script in hand. And what I would do is break it down into what I feel would be the visual effects for this movie. Let's say it's written on the page that, there's a blue sky with a storm coming in the distance. The streets are desolate. Well, for me, what I would see in my head is, okay, they're going to shoot this movie. It could be a sunny day or it could be cloudy. I don't know. So I'm going to say there's going to be a sky replacement. Will they be able to close all the streets in the neighborhood? Probably not. So we're going to have to account for removing cars, removing people potentially walking in that area. So those are the kind of things that I would look into. And I would also budget the project, and then we would do what call a pitch package, where we might actually send our vision for the project, like what kind of art direction, what kind of overall look we would present to the client. So that's kind of my world.
You're right. You can't guarantee a nice weather or bad weather or whatever weather. So
you can't, and there's things that are always beyond people's control. Let's say, I mean, a good example, we shot the movie Crawl in Serbia, but yet the movie location is supposed to be Florida. So how do you make Serbia look like Florida? So if you look on our website, you can actually go see the breakdown. You could see, some of it was inside a set because the houses needed to be flooded. So we couldn't do that out in the open public. You can't just say, hey, I'm going to flood your house. So we did all the extensions of the background to make it look like Florida.
It's really incredible how seamless CGI is these days. Sometimes we really can't tell where reality stops and the fantasy begins. This is Marjo's world, and it's clear that she still loves her job. Let's find out why.
What do you love about your job?
Everything. It's challenging, it's fun, it's collaborative, it's inventive. You're proud of what you've accomplished, and especially when you go to the theater and you kind of sneak in the back and you see how much people are enjoying what you've done, it feels great.
So maybe this is the right time to ask, like, what is something that people are probably surprised to learn about working in a creative domain?
The working hours. We work a lot. Sometimes we work a lot and sometimes it's a bit slower. You go through your wave. If you're on set, usually the working hours are 14 hours a day and it can be 6 days a week. So you'll work extensively for like 2 or 3 months and then that portion is done. So for people that do on set, they may not work for another 6 weeks after that until the other project starts up. So it can be seasonal for some people. For computer graphics artists, it's a lot more stable, but it's very 9 to 5, 9 to 6 kind of thing. There's still, good 8 to 10 hour days depending on the project. So sitting down at your computer. So you got to be ready for that. And you don't get to go on set often. If you are in CG, quite frankly, rarely to none. Only certain people do. So there's a bit of fantasy that people will actually see actors, but you don't get to see them unless you're on set.
Yeah, if you're doing the computer stuff, it's not even necessarily in the same city. Then you can be
anywhere
in a different city. Yeah, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there's hubs everywhere. I mean, of course, Quebec is a big one.
Let's talk now about English. So I really like your story about going to Cégep Saint Laurent. What a great reason to go to that Cégep. But how often would you say you use English?
Every day. I use English. Now, especially with my job, most people are Anglo. When I call the studio in Los Angeles, they speak English. They're not going to speak French. I use both, and our studios are bilingual. So whether it's the one in LA, Montreal, Quebec City, or Munich, our studios are bilingual. And we'll have classes for people as well.
It's worth noting that most digital arts and IT fields require English skills. Next, Marjo identifies some other skills you'll need for work.
What are some important skills to develop?
For me, being participatory, collaborative, sense of observation to always improve on what you do, pushing the envelope, giving your 100%. These are all great skills to have when working, regardless of whether or not you're wanting to work in the visual effects and animation industry or games. It's still, still great skills to have in general.
And speaking of skills, something else we can all learn to do better is how to receive criticism. Here's Marjo's take on it.
I said, you're not doing anything wrong if somebody doesn't like it necessarily. It's just a question that you're achieving somebody else's vision. So you have to learn to listen and take that in and interpret it to make sure that you're getting the essence of what they're saying so that you can accomplish your tasks and do them well. It happened to me, where I was doing an animation and I thought, this is my best animation ever. And then they're like, no, this is not what we want. You need to do this and that. And this is what happens next in the movie. And then you're like, I gotta do it again. So yeah, it happens. But it's not because I did it badly. It's just because that's not what was needed or wanted at that point. So
finally, we're going to end with one last bit of advice from Marjo.
But you have to think about you as a person, who you are, as your brand, I guess you could say. We're obviously not going to put somebody who loves to do like creatures, let's say, like on Stranger Things, but we're not going to put that person on a show that's, let's say, a Pixar film like project if they don't like doing it, So obviously we're going to cast according to the project. So sure, you can be good at many things, but also think about what you love doing, because if you're passionate about something, you'll succeed for sure doing it, and that's what you should present, your best light.
Okay, that's all for this episode. Thank you again to our guest, Marjolaine Tremblay, for sharing her advice and stories. We would also like to acknowledge the Government of Canada for funding this initiative. Join us next time for our talk with Judy Twiddell about her work at Elections Quebec. This is the Pathways Podcast. Signing off. Until next time.